we're not going to be here tonight and wanted to keep up with the class, I'm going to record just so you guys know that we're recording. Um, so I want to, before we get started on our next topic, which is questioning, I want us to look at the final project again. I want to make sure that we're all I got to find where I'm looking, that we're all kind of in the right place. I looked at your websites and they look great. You've got a great start to it. You have your pages on there, which is great. A couple of you, I made some comments like making sure that you put buttons going back and forth from each page so that it's easy to navigate. But other than that, they looked really, really good. I just want to remind you again of what needs to be on that project so that as we continue to go through our topics, you'll see where we're going and why we're doing that. So last week we spent time on standards and your mini lesson, which I've looked at a couple. I haven't really graded anything yet, but they look really good. So you guys are getting into your standards and just kind of playing around a little bit. Most of you didn't even know you had standards to teach by. So that was a good little practice for you just to at least look at what's there and what will be expected of you. So that is going to be part of your final project as well. So I just want to go back again and look at that final project. And I try to link it in about every other week and give you some time to build that. It's built into our class time just so it doesn't jump up at you at the last minute. So just to remind you, that the purpose of this final project is to design an interactive learning experience that integrates media or technology tools. So that mini lesson that you did the other day or last week is just a small snippet of what your final project is going to be. This lesson should address both teaching with media tools and students creating with media tools. So not only will you be using media to help teach your lesson in your final project, but students should be creating something, whether it's a Google slide or a video. And then in a few weeks, I'm going to show you a couple other little things that they could create in your lesson. Remember that your activities will leverage students' learning in a face-to-face setting, integrating media or technology through social constructivist learning, which we'll talk about later. You will not implement this lesson, obviously, but it may be something that you could use in your future classroom setting. So just remember that. It doesn't have to be something that you will teach, but it's a good foundation for something later on. The activity that you're going to include in your lesson can be using cameras or mobile phones for photography. It can be video production with cameras, phones, or other tools. It can be a digital audio production or a podcast using tools such as Anchor, or again, a mobile phone. You can use screencasting tools, mobile phones and tablets. You can use Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Just if you're going to incorporate that into your lesson, just make sure you understand. And we'll talk more about social media in a few weeks and kind of how to protect your students from straying. You can do digital storytelling using VoiceThread, Versa, Canva, Adobe Spark. I don't know if you've heard of any of those or not. These are just ideas that you can use. You can use Padlet, Flipgrid, and Modo. We have used Flipgrid. We have used Padlet. We have used some other forms of online interaction, so you could use any of that. You could use smartboards. It just goes on and on. Mobile apps such as Doink, Snapseed, online educational videos, or other media technology tools. So one thing I would ask is that if you have a tool that isn't mentioned here, isn't widely used, let me know if you're going to put it in your lesson first, just so I can make sure that it is appropriate. Your project will be one deliverable, one thing, and that is your website portfolio that you've already started building. You'll assemble each of those tabs, your interactive learning plan, in your website portfolio. It will document your plans. It'll be clear. We'll demonstrate all of your details. And things I'll be looking at, not just your content, it's the way that it looked. And I know I commented on several of your websites about how the colors and the fonts go well together. So as you're designing this website, be aware too that it's not just content, it's what it looks like and how it feels. And is it inviting to the student? This is the one deliverable that you will submit here, and you'll submit to TK20, which you probably still can't get into, which none of the other classes, as far as I know, can get into either, or they're adding them as they go. So it's not a big deal. So in your final project, you'll have a title and visuals, which most of you already have. You have your title, you have pictures, you'll have your name, which you already have. You probably have not put this on there yet, but you will be thinking about how you're going to create a lesson that connects to BK12 learning, which is going to draw in what you know about your learners, about your age group, and what you want them to learn. The learning standards, which we talked about last week, you'll include your standards that you will be teaching in your lesson for your portfolio. So you have a link to those now so that you can investigate them a little bit further and know which standards you want to include in your lesson. You will describe your learning experience in detail, and that's just what students do, what teachers do. What students do, what teachers do. Part of that is going to be how you're going to ask questions and what you're hoping to get from them. You will have a section where students will create or interact with media, whether it's a video or a PowerPoint or whatever media you've decided, a Padlet. What we're going to talk about this week is critical questioning. So your project will need to have open-ended higher order thinking questions, and we'll talk about how you create those and what those look like. You will have your students create something in your lesson, and then you'll have a reference tab. So again, and a reflection tab. So you'll reflect on this whole project and semester. So I just wanted to go back over that as we're 6 weeks into our semester. We're a third of the way there. So I wanted to go back and touch on that again, just so you'll know everything we're doing is building toward that final project. And everything that we do should start going into that portfolio in one way or the other. So you can, after last week, you can start thinking and adding standards. What standards do I want my final project to teach? So you have that document, you've had a little bit of time to play in those standards. So that could be one thing that you could be working on towards your final project, is thinking about and pulling those standards in that you want to teach. So this week, we are going to talk about questions and what good questions are and how to ask good questions. So our guiding question of the night is, what is meant by question levels? What are the benefits of asking open-ended questions? And what might we define as higher order thinking? How does a teacher build towards higher order thinking? How do we create meaningful questions? And how will you prepare your students for active engagement with the media? So how many of us have heard of Bloom's taxonomy? Some of us not. Okay, so some of us, it's a new term. And for some of us, you've heard it. You maybe heard it in your classes. Your teachers maybe have said something about, we're going to go up the Bloom's triangle, or we're going to make sure we ask higher order thinking questions. When we look at Bloom's taxonomy, and this is something that you're going to need to be familiar with from now on. If you don't know what it is, you need to know what it is right now. You need to understand what Bloom's questioning is. You need to understand that there are levels of questioning. And we're going to look at it a couple of different ways. So if we look at Bloom's taxonomy first, we can look at it as a triangle. The lower level is your basic yes, no, recall fact questions. And as you can see on the triangle, those are your remember questions. Those are just your basic, remember your birthday, remember your address, remember your phone number, remember the year the Civil War started, remember a noun, remember a verb. Those are things that are just basic recall questions, and they're important. Don't ever think that recall questions are not important, but they are not higher order thinking. They are your basic questions that every single student should be able to answer. Then we move up a level to understand. If you notice in the triangle, understand says that we explain ideas. We are able to explain by describing, discussing, identifying, locating. These verbs are very important, that you understand where these verbs fall, so that when you're creating questions, you know the stem to start with. So we jump from remember to understand. Then we go to apply. So the student can remember something, they can explain it to you, but then can they apply it to something new? Can they implement it? Can they use it to demonstrate? Can they interpret? Can they sketch something? Can they apply what you've taught them? Then we go to analyze. Not only can they remember, understand, and apply, but can they draw connections? Now that they can recall what you've asked them to recall, and now that they can explain what you want them to explain, and now that they can apply it, can they relate to something else? Can they compare and contrast? Can they examine something and dig deeper? The next level is evaluate. This is where they have to justify their stand or their decision. That means they can argue their point. And if a student can debate or argue a point, that means they pretty well understand. Now, sometimes, kids just argue because they want to argue. But we're talking about something that you have taught them, something educational. If they can, and that's why it's always good to allow students a voice and to allow students to explain and allow students to teach. You always learn better when you teach than when you just sit and get. And then the top level of Bloom's taxonomy is to create, produce a new or original work. All of these levels are going to be in your final media production at some level. And that top level create is going to be that media production that your students create back for you. So that's not that that's the most important, but that is the highest level of questioning and thinking. It allows students to actually make something. Take everything you've learned, not just apply it, not just justify, but now take it all and make something out of it. That means they understand all of the parts. So you've got those 6 levels. Now, when we look at questioning in Bloom's, we have a little diagram here that's got some really great verbs for you and some activities, some planning verbs. So if you were thinking about just wanting your kids to remember something, then you would have them copy. So they take notes. They take notes, they study, they remember. You might have them do definitions. Again, it's just remembering. If you look down through here, all of these verbs, all of these thinking things are going to allow them to remember. Again, it's not a bad thing. It is necessary for a lot of things that we teach. If we're teaching math, kids have to remember rules. They have to remember formulas. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have to go beyond just remembering. So we've got all of these verbs that help us plan activities to help our kids remember. Then we jump over to understanding. And again, we have all of these verbs that help us plan for helping our kids understand. Journaling. Journaling's a big thing. When you have kids write, kids are showing you that they understand what you're saying to them. When you have them spit it back to you, summarizing is huge. Students don't know how to summarize because they don't understand. They don't know how to put it all together and understand. Estimating is huge in math. Kids have to understand, turn off the timer. Kids have to understand the process of math to estimate an answer. Then we go to applying. Have kids act out something. Have kids execute something. Have kids sketch something. Have them paint. Have them integrate. Have them present. All of these are applying what they've learned in a way that you know. We go to analyzing. Can kids categorize? Can they deconstruct something and put it back together? Can they organize? Can they distinguish and illustrate? And I'm hoping that you're seeing as we go up these levels how these skills get tighter and how they get deeper. It's not just that basic level anymore. It's really deep understanding and being able to take what they understand and use it. You get to evaluating, and you have all of these verbs. Now, a lot of times evaluating does mean the same thing as testing, but it's not like what you're thinking as far as giving the student a test. It's, can the student evaluate what you have told them, give it value? Can they assess what it means? Can they experiment with it? Can they measure with it? Can they predict with it? It just kind of depends on the subject and the grade level. But these questions, these verbs, are applied to every single grade level, every single subject, from kindergarten, birth, kindergarten, all the way up to 12th grade. You just have to think about what you're wanting the kids to do. The highest level of learning and questioning is creating, just like it was on the triangle. When you're creating, you're asking kids to build, to blog, to compose. They might make a film. You've got kids who love to make movies. So they're taking everything they've learned and they're putting it into a film. They're role playing. It takes a lot for a student to be able to role play a situation. They have to completely understand what they're talking about. So these are going to be really good verbs for you to keep handy. And you're going to be using some of these verbs here in just a little bit in an activity that you're going to do. So before we go on, I have a little 4-minute video on Bloom's taxonomy. So I'm going to share my sound and play this video real quickly, and then we'll move on.
Box that teachers or students can use to classify and organize learning objectives. Its most popular version is based on the cognitive domain and assumes that learning should be structured from easy to difficult in the following 6 steps. 1. Remember. 2. Understand. 3. Apply. 4. Analyze. 5. Evaluate. 6. Create. On the first level, we learn to remember. There is just rote memorization and recollection of facts without much understanding. For example, if we learn about lemons, we want to remember the name, shape, color, size, and that they are sour. Once we memorize these essentially meaningless facts, we move to the second level of learning. On level 2, we learn to understand. We begin to decode information and learn that a lemon is yellow when it's ripe to eat, and if we take a bite, that it's really super sour. We also understand that lemons love sunshine and that they contain lots of vitamin C, which is a great natural antioxidant that keeps us healthy. Now, as we really understand a lemon, we can work with it. On the third level, we apply what we know. We've understood that while lemons are sour, they are also a great provider of vitamin C. To apply this knowledge in a meaningful way, we could boil a lemon into hot water and add some honey. Then serve this hot lemon to our sick sister who's in need of treatment. On the fourth level, we learn to analyze. This involves examining and breaking down information into components, determining how the parts relate to one another, and finding evidence to support generalizations. We study the lemon flesh, examine the skin, and look at levels of vitamins. We conclude that we can eat everything inside, while the skin tastes bitter and contains traces of toxic pesticides. It ought not to be consumed. Now we are ready to evaluate. We analyze, critique, and compare. To evaluate our lemon as a good source of vitamins, we compare it to other sources, such as oranges and supplements. We look at the following properties: vitamin levels, affordability, taste, and packaging waste. If we evaluate our thoughts critically and without bias, we learn where the lemons score high and where others score higher. Now, after we have learned, understood, applied, analyzed, and evaluated, we are ready to create. As we now really understand lemons, also in comparison to similar things, we can formulate a plan to create our own natural lemonade. It's now easy to come up with a cute shop design, a good name, and a good slogan natural, healthy, yummy. Bloom's taxonomy was first created in 1946 by American psychologist Benjamin Bloom. The revised version from 2001, as just presented, serves as the backbone of many teaching philosophies, in particular those that aim towards teaching specific skills. Each level usually comes with a clear learning objective that can be tested. Critics of the taxonomy often question the existence of a sequential, hierarchical link between each level. What are your thoughts? Please share them in the comments below.
Okay. What are your
Millions
thoughts?
of students from
Woo.
all around the globe
Sorry.
have watched our Sprouts videos for better
Oh.
learning. Thousands of teachers play them in their classrooms.
I can't make it stop. There. Okay. Tell me, okay, let's talk just a minute. What do we think about Bloom's? I mean, he just showed you how he went from a lemon to a whole industry of making natural lemonade. So let's talk a minute about what you just saw and what that means. Now, I know y'all are here. I know you probably went to the ball game and you're really tired and sleepy, but let's talk about the questioning levels. What did you see? Let's just talk about the lemon. What did you see that those students could now do now that they know all those things about a lemon?
They could kind of make something profitable off of their knowledge. Like he had the example of like the lemonade stand. Like once you have a further kind of understanding of a subject, you may not like profit off of it like monetarily, but in some way you're like benefiting yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a lot of knowledge about what they were doing. They had a lot of information about lemons, and they were able to use that to their advantage.
What does that tell you about what you're teaching your students?
That it's going to have an important impact depending on how we go about doing it. We can either be really, really good teachers, or we can be not so good teachers and not leave these kids with as good of an education as they could be getting, and they will have the tools later on down the road. We're kind of setting them up, I guess.
Anyone else?
I think this is kind of a good way to measure whether your students like fully grasp a concept you're trying to teach them. So if you can see that they can apply it and they can create something with it, then you know that you've gotten it through clearly, and maybe some students will get it faster than others.
And that is oh, go ahead, Holly Marie.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that this is also a really good way to make sure that you're incorporating a bunch of different learning styles, because you are having to go through so many different steps to kind of get to where you need to be. That leaves you multiple opportunities to try different ways and like use different styles and make sure that all of your students are able to benefit from it.
Both of you just said key terms there. You're helping all learning styles, because you're going to approach learning differently for different kids. And you also mentioned that different kids are going to get things at different times and in different ways. So is every student in your classroom going to get to the creating stage? I see heads shaking. No, they're not. They're not. And that's okay. Have you ever heard of the term differentiation? Okay. Differentiation is when you are teaching students at their level and you are expecting back from them at their level. Now, that doesn't mean that you have low expectations. That means that you understand that this EC child and this advanced child are going to learn differently at different levels and at different rates. So not every child is going to create in your classroom, and you really can't expect that. Can you expect every child to remember? Yes, you can. You can. Because you have so many different ways of allowing, even that the lowest of the low kids, those kids that we call pull out the kids that you call self-contained. In some places they call them LI, which is low incidence. Some schools they call them self-contained. Those are the kids that go into class and stay there all day long with the teacher and the 2 or 3 aides. Those kids can remember. Those kids can understand. Those kids can apply. The first 3 levels, just about every kid can do. Now, when you get to analyzing, evaluating, and creating, that's where it gets a little more complicated, but I'm not saying they can't do it. It just takes more time. And you are going to have kids that you never get to this level. So you as the teacher have to understand that. You know, we talked about learner 1, learner 2, learner 3. We talked about multiple intelligences and the way different kids learn. So now we're talking about that questioning phase, and how am I going to question my kids, and how am I going to make sure that they have that deep understanding? I believe Holly Marie said, or somebody said, about having the deep understanding about what I'm teaching them. How am I going to guarantee that? And how am I going to guarantee that my kids are getting the best education that they can get? I don't want to shortchange them. I don't want to give them a surface level education. I want them to have a deep understanding of what, if it's caterpillars I'm studying, then I want them to understand caterpillars. If it is calculus I'm studying, I want them to understand it. I don't want them to just know it. We want them to go beyond that. So thinking about these levels is really important for you as a teacher. And as you start thinking about the subject that you want to teach and the grade level that you want to teach, you really need to start thinking about, how am I going to raise the bar, raise my expectations, and make sure that my students are getting the education that they need, while balancing it out by knowing you have probably an end of grade test that they have to pass. Can't throw that away. It's always going to be there. So you have to balance. It's a balancing act. You have to figure out how that works in your classroom. But you will, I have in my classroom, when I had my classroom, I had a poster up of Bloom's taxonomy, and I had those verbs right where I could see them. And that way, when you're having class and you're asking questions, you know what to ask them. You know how to frame that question. Going on down, I just wanted to give you an example of what it might look like. So let's say that you're teaching a lesson on Star Wars. I don't know why you would, but let's just say that you are. So a knowledge question would be, define what is evil about Darth Vader. And then write an original song to describe your feelings. That, you know, the kid knows it. You know the kid watched the movie, and you know that they can explain Darth Vader's evil. Can every kid do that if they watch the movie? Yes, they can. They know he's evil. I mean, all they got to do is look at him and hear the music, and they know he's evil. Now, writing an original song, they could do that. That might be a little difficult, but they could at least write it down and know why he's evil. Then you go to comprehension. Identify each character as good or evil, and describe qualities as they relate to popular characters on a TV series. So now you're really digging deep or deeper, and you're asking them to not only tell me Darth Vader's evil, but now identify Luke Skywalker and identify Han Solo, Princess Leia, the Ewoks. I mean, whichever movie you're watching. Are they good? Are they evil? And can you compare them to a popular show the kids watch, whatever age group it is that they're watching? Okay, then we go to application. Write a travel log for the places Luke visited in his galaxy. That means they have to remember logically where he was, where he went next, and what happened while he was there. Then we go to analyze. Compare B drones to the stormtroopers. prepare an oral presentation to explain your findings. So they're actually digging in and analyzing those two things and comparing, and they're going to present it. Synthesize, develop a game which has a theme, good versus evil. So not only you've gone completely away from Darth Vader, and now you've gone to these abstract things of good and evil, and they're creating a game revolving around good and evil. And then evaluation. Explain what the expression "may the force be with you" means to you. So if you were teaching a lesson on Star Wars, can you see how it goes from that just basic knowledge level to this explain the expression "may the force be with you," which is so abstract, and that student has to understand everything that happened in that movie and good versus evil to be able to explain that to you. So you may have kids who stop at application, and that's okay. But if you've got kids who need to go beyond that, this is how you differentiate for them. Push them on up to that evaluation level. Push them on up into something they're a little bit uncomfortable with. Push them into an activity that they've maybe never done before using these Bloom's levels. So you could take anything and put them into those levels. As a teacher, you're only limited by your imagination. So use it well. Here's another little chart that gives you, again, some ideas as to what a question might be. If it's a basic knowledge question, it's who, what, when, where, how. Your basic questions. If it's a comprehension, it's a retell. It's a comparison. If it's application, it's how, is. If it's an analysis, you're asking about classifying and features and comparing and contrast and evidence. If it's synthesis, it's a prediction or an inference. Creating, combining ideas, composing, constructing. And if it's evaluation, you're asking them to appraise or decide or defend. So you're going to be using that chart here in just a minute. What I'm going to do is put you in breakout rooms. So you'll probably have 2 to 3 people. We've got 19 folks on right now, so it'll be 2 to 3 people. And I'm going to ask you to watch 2 videos. Now look at the directions very carefully. In your breakout room, you're going to watch the video below, and that's this one, the 3 Little Pigs insurance fraud. Watch this video, and I want you as a group to develop 2 questions for each level of Bloom's that you would use for high school kids. And I know a lot of you aren't high school, but that's okay. This is good questioning practice. So you're going to watch the video, and then for each one of those 6 levels, I want 2 questions for high school kids. Remember, you must decide what you want them to learn from the video before you ask the questions. Then I want you as a group to watch the 3 Little Pigs. This is the fairy tale of the 3 Little Pigs. Same thing. But I want you to think that you're asking ages 5 to 7 questions. And again, I know some of you aren't little kid teachers, but that's okay. Think about what you want them to learn from the video before you look at the questioning. So for each of these videos, you're going to write 2 questions for each level, which is a total of 12 questions for this video for high school kids, and then a total of 12 questions of this video for kindergarten first graders, 2 per level. I'm going to give you, each video is like 2 to 3 minutes. And then I'm going to give you about 20 minutes as a breakout group to watch the video and then come up with those questions. And then I'll pull you all back together. Is there a question before I put you in breakout groups? Okay, I'm just going to let it choose who's going to be where. All right, have at it, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, do y'all not have a room?
Hey, sorry, it kicked me off. Like my laptop got kicked off of the school's like internet. So I don't know
Oh,
what's
okay.
it kicked me off of Zoom, but I got on my phone.
Mine, do you remember what room you were in? Were you in 3,
I didn't
both
even
of
make
you?
it in a room.
Me too.
It kicked me off before that.
Okay, so I'm gonna send one of you, I'm gonna send you both to room
Okay,
3.
what are we doing? It kicked me off before all of
You are
that.
watching, okay, you're gonna watch both videos.
Okay.
That's on the class. The top video you're gonna watch, and then you guys are gonna create 2 questions for each level of Bloom's that you wanna ask a high school student. And then the second one is the same thing, except it's for 5 to 7-year-olds.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I wanna move you both to room
Okay,
3.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Boarding in.
Okay, just about got everybody back. All right, so let's talk for a few minutes. For the first video, the first thing that you had to do was decide what you wanted them to learn. So who can tell me what you want your high school students to learn from this Three Little Pigs insurance fraud video?
I can. My group, we only just like kind of got together to talk right as breakout rooms were getting ready to end. But we talked about kind of what we wanted to have our students learn. We were talking about, at least for the first video, like internet, talking about social media and the importance of social media, because it had a pretty major role in this video. And I think that that would be a good transition into talking about your role in social media and the world around you and kind of how it interacts with each other. I think it could also kind of branch out into like picking articles and like biased and unbiased articles and stuff like that. The Guardian had a role in this video, so I think that that has a good kind of like transition there. But that's pretty much it.
Okay. Did any other group have a different thing or a different theme that they decided they wanted their students to learn from the video?
So we kind of talked about differentiating right from wrong, and the whole like, was the pigs in the right for cooking the wolf, basically. You know, being able to see what might be too far.
Okay. Anyone else?
My group was kind of going into the base, like we were going through the remembering, understanding, and applying. And our basic stuff was like, what was the plot? But then you could go further into it with like, what was the actual theme and like, what was it trying to convey? And we are specifically talking about the mortgage part of it because that's like a very real aspect of real life. So that's what we were kind of going into, like, how does that legit apply to like what happens in life?
And that's a great, you're talking about the first video there. So we're talking about high school students, and I know that high school students really aren't buying houses and stuff. However, you mentioned mortgage. So if you're looking at these levels of questioning, just think how deep you could get those kids to think about mortgage on a home. What is most important when you think about a mortgage on a home? Prioritize the things you should think about if you're going to buy a home. You're really getting those kids to think about more than just, oh, I'll just write a check and get a house. You know, there's a lot of things involved in that. And having those kids really evaluate and dig down is a real high order thinking skill. Now, all of your kids aren't going to understand that. Some kids might just have to remember what a mortgage is, but you can build on those skills. So very good. Anybody else?
Sorry, it's kind of loud where I am, so it may be hard to hear me. But I was thinking like for the evaluation section of the one for high school kids is like, there was a big debate about like who's the victim, you know, and like if the pigs were in the wrong, then it's like, were they looking for somebody who could be easily seen as like somebody who would like be the conventional person to commit the crime or like have bad intent? So you can make kids think about like, how do people like blame other people to get off? Like who's actually malicious, and looking past like systemic things. In a way, like, I don't know if you guys have seen Zootopia, but it kind of made me think of that. How like people would like be like prejudiced against predators and stuff. I don't know. So like making them think about social justice in that sense, and just like social studies and how media plays, because like the social media really added to that. But I think it's definitely interesting because there are some where they're like, oh, like the pigs are obviously the victims here, but it's like, do you actually go deeper? Like, what's the actual proof? So definitely like on that deeper level, thinking of like, how is this related to issues today, I guess.
That's very good. So you're asking them to defend and justify, but not only are you going to that higher level, but you are also asking them to connect to what's going on right now today. So they're learning their skill, you're teaching them about justice, but you're also having them connect. When you have students connect, they will never forget. And I'm sure that all of you can think back to teachers who were really good at connecting for you, and you just always remember it. You may not always remember the teacher, but you always remember what they taught you. Okay, anybody else on that first video? Somebody give me, we'll talk about the second video on Wednesday. Somebody give me a level 1 knowledge question that you came up with for that first video.
Who are the main characters?
Excellent. Who are the main characters? And every person that watched that can tell us that, right? And no? Who are the main characters?
The pigs and the wolf.
Yeah, very good. So even if you didn't know what that video is trying to tell you, the main characters are the pig and the pigs and the wolf, the 3 little pigs and the wolf. All right. Give me a comprehension question, a level 2 question from that video.
We came up with explain what the main conflict is.
All right, very good. And what is the main conflict? What did y'all think it was?
The wolf is dead and we don't know what happened.
Okay, so explain what the conflict is. So you already know the main characters. Now tell me, interpret, paraphrase, put in your own words, he's dead and what happened? We don't know what happened. And you can even go to like, can you write a brief outline of, the wolf dying? Can you retell it in your own words? Very good. Give me a level 3 question, an application question.
What part did social media play in this video or in this story?
And what was your answer to that?
It was spreading it around and it kept changing the story of what happened.
Very good. And
the more people talked about it, the more the story changed and the more things were different.
Mm-hmm. Was there somebody else speaking? All right, so you're asking them to use the information, use the facts from the video and apply it. What has happened? Demonstrate, draw, find out, draw, give me an example, which I did. Okay, a level 4 question, analysis. Anybody get to analysis? Is that a hard one, or did you just not have time to get to it?
My group just didn't get to it, but I'm looking at the chart here and just off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe a question. Sorry, I'm looking so close. I'm on my phone, but maybe you could ask like, what do you think happened and what's your reasoning behind it?
Very good. What do you think happened? What is your reasoning? And you're asking them to infer. You're asking them to be specific. You're asking them, see the word dissect, deduct. You're asking them to take what happened, think deeper, and tell me, infer what you think happened. We know they're dead, but why and what happened? How did we get there? Did anybody get to level 5? Can anybody off the top of your head think of a level 5 question for that first video?
You could maybe ask, what could the pigs have done differently or better than what they originally did?
Excellent. Now you're asking them to take what they already know and what they learned from the video and put it together. What could they have done differently? And that question really, there may not be a right or wrong to that particular question. It may just be, I'm getting you to think, and I'm getting you to make connections, and I'm getting you to draw from what you know and what you just learned. All right, and then what about level 6? We kind of started at level 6, but give me a level 6 question.
Maybe if you were in this situation, what would you do?
Okay, right. So now they're going to give their opinion. They're going to support it. They're going to probably have judgments and make decisions. So very good. So you can see how it goes from that very basic, who are the characters, that very basic knowledge that you're going to get from watching something or reading something or listening something, to all the way down to change the whole thing around and give me your opinion. Tell me what you would do, make your decisions, defend what you're saying needs to happen. So you went through the 6 levels. Now I don't even know if y'all got time to watch the second one. So what I want you to do, we're going to talk about this one on Wednesday. So I would like for each of you to watch The 3 Little Pigs, and it is The 3 Little Pigs. It's a story you all know. I would like for you to watch it and come up with a couple of questions for each level. And if you need to go back and watch the other one, if you're not real sure still, that's fine. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just asking you to watch The 3 Little Pigs and then come up with 2 questions for each level of blooms. Now we're looking at little kids now, okay? We're looking at 5 to 7. So get high school out of your brain and think about those little kindergarten, first, second graders. What would you ask them at each level? Okay? So you don't have to turn it in anywhere. It doesn't go in your notebook. You don't have to submit it. I just want you to watch it and think about those questions, and then we'll talk about that on Wednesday. All right? All good? Okay, guys, it's 6:01, so it's time to get off here. So everybody have a good evening. I'll see you Wednesday.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.